As Russian forces push toward Ukraine's capital this morning, we're joined again by Professor William Muck, chair of the Political Science Department at North Central College in Naperville. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
What is the significance of President Putin attacking Kiev?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, it's an indication that he has ambitions to topple the government, right? So earlier in the week, we were talking that Putin may only intervene in those two small pro-Russian separatist regions, but now he's talking about taking all of Ukraine. And I think if he's doing that, it means that he wants to topple the government. He wants to install a government that is much more pro-Russian. Since 2014, you've seen Ukraine drift away from Russia, and I think that's probably the goal. I think the other thing is it reminds us that this is going to look like nothing, like no war we've seen probably since World War II, when you see a major European capital being attacked.
And we talked last week, toppling the government was a long shot. This conflict spreading beyond Ukraine's borders into Poland was a long shot. Many analysts didn't expect President Putin to invade Ukraine at all. Do you think he could surprise the world again by attacking Poland?
Well, I guarantee this is a conversation that the United States and the NATO allies were having yesterday. Putin has demonstrated that he's willing to incur a high cost, economic cost, political, diplomatic, by invading Ukraine. And then the question is, if you're willing to do that, where do you stop? In the past, Putin has said that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. So one gets the sense that he may be trying to rewrite history here and expand in Ukraine and continue to grow. And so then if you're Poland or if you're any one of the other countries along Russia's border, you have to be very, very concerned about this. So, it may not be likely, but I think absolutely these conversations are occurring. And when somebody demonstrates a willingness to invade one country, where does that stop?
Well, one of the big differences here also is that Poland is a NATO member. So if it is drawn into the conflict, would that then trigger a response of American troops?
Absolutely. That's the huge difference between Ukraine and Poland. If Russia were to move against Poland, the United States is treaty bound to respond. So Article 5 of the NATO treaty says that an attack against one is an attack against all. And Biden and all previous U.S. presidents have been ironclad about that the United States would come to the defense of a NATO country. So now that may prove to be a deterrent for Russia to say that they do not want to face the wrath of the entire NATO community. But again, Putin is operating at a different level here. But it certainly is a major concern for the United States at this point.
And of course, Ukraine is not a NATO member. We could argue that's in large part what this conflict is about. But the president of Ukraine has pleaded for more help from the international community. Do you think that we'll see anything happen beyond sanctions here?
It's probably unlikely. We're going to see some more robust sanctions come over the next few days, but there's very little that the United States and NATO can really do short of putting troops on the ground. So there may be some more military support. What you might see is efforts to put some more pressure on Putin at home. So the last couple, or yesterday, we saw a number of protests in Russia. So this is not as popular in Russia as I think Putin saw. And there's no guarantee that he's going to be able to survive this. So, right, we're talking about Putin advancing in Europe, but it's also possible that this could cost him domestically. So there may be some tactics, some actions that the U.S. could take to make life more difficult for Putin at home. This is a gamble that Putin has taken, and the U.S. and NATO can do more to make him feel that pain in his own domestic political system as well.
All of this still unfolding and much to follow. Professor William Muck from the North Central College in Naperville, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Good to be here.